Welcome to fomonomore. I'm Joy Abdullah from Malaysia. I'm a strategic marketing specialist by profession, and it's a pleasure to be here to share a few tips on how to go forward, be present, and mindful going through this week. I'll be covering a few tips that'll help you take yourself individually as well as your business forward. So let's go. In order to help all of us, I've broken this whole week down into 3 segments: adapt, improvise, implement. So what I'm going to be doing is helping all of us, including reminding myself, with 2 tips per day. You can take it away, shoot some questions back in here, and I can come back and answer them and use them. I'll give you a summary so that you can use them on Saturday when I end this entire series. So let's look at what's today's tips. Today, we're going to start with the adapt phase, the phase where we realize change has come in and we need to adapt. Otherwise, we are going to be left behind or we'll be running to catch up with the change. So here's 2 things that we can do to bring our mindsets around individually and then take it into our business or into our employment in order to be able to adapt. Number 1, be flexible. Flexibility helps in accepting the situation that has folded. And we all know where we are, how we are in this current scenario. But let me assure you, as I speak to my clients and I speak to lots of people throughout the month and this past weeks, I've been seeing people changing businesses and changing business processes rather in very, very innovative ways. It's been possible for one reason and one reason only, and that is flexibility. To be flexible, the key is on focusing on what the reality is. It's not what our minds think up of, because what happens in all cases when we have change or something different happening to what we are used to is that our mind projects something which we call fear. It throws up a whole lot of what if scenarios. Now, those are not the real reality. The reality is things have changed, circumstances have changed. So what we need to do is to pause, hold, scan what is the change, what's happening, and what exactly are the obstacles we're facing. We need to focus on what is really bothering us or what is really stopping us from implementing what we want to do or to continue our business. Now let's take it a little further and let's take it individually and then professionally or in business. As individuals, we always find it hard to adapt to change. I do. I've had to train myself over the past years to actually being flexible, to receiving the change that's coming in, understanding what's changing, focusing on where the bottlenecks or obstacles are, and actually looking at what really is the obstacle. Is it driving from home to work? Is it taking the goods that are being manufactured or produced and delivering it somewhere? Where exactly is the obstacle? What happens when we break it down into these micro scenarios is that you're able to focus and pinpoint what really needs to be the change. So the advantage of focusing on what the obstacle is that it becomes a small baby step, not a large, huge change. Bringing it into small baby steps and breaking it down or chunking it down into bite size helps us refocus on what's necessary to be done. So say individually, let's take an example. I want to drive out, but there are some impediments at the moment that I cannot drive out. Okay, let's accept those obstacles and see what is it that I can do. Why was I driving out in the first place? Now, if it is to go to the shop or go to a market, perhaps can I go walking to one closer than the one I would have driven to? By looking at these kind of changes, looking at options, the perspective changes. So what happens in our own mental makeup is that the flexibility allows us to focus and chunk down on what really is the main obstacle. When you look at that micro obstacle, you immediately come up with a set of solutions or different perspectives of looking at how to move around or create a workaround from that obstacle. And when you create a workaround, you automatically feel good because you've solved what used to be a problem. And that's the adaptability or the flexibility coming in to that scenario at that point in time. A key point in being flexible and being able to adapt is to have an open mind. It's not to always sit and question what if, but to actually look at it, look at the what if from the angle of curiosity. You have an obstacle or you have an issue. How can you work around it? What are the tools available in your resources within your contacts and your environment? And as you look at each one of them and you look at that minor obstacle, the small chunk down bite size, it becomes a small little problem to solve. And we solve tons of problems and we are making thousands of decisions unconsciously throughout the day. Something as simple as, what shirt do I wear today? I've got a couple of calls. Do I change my shirt? All of these we actually do unconsciously. In a similar manner, professionally, being mindful, knowing that you are chunking the obstacle down, you are telling your brain, you're telling your mind, you're being mindful, that you're being flexible. So you're taking on board a series of perspectives. You're making yourself curious to see what tools and what resources do I have that allow me to address this problem. And you've broken that problem down. So recapping, the first step in being adaptable is actually going in and being flexible and exploring your options, opening your mind up to the perspectives around you, taking on board these perspectives and looking at which one will help you solve that little bottleneck, that little obstacle to continue on. If you practice this over the next week while I'm talking on this series and you're joining me, if you practice this individually, you'll see at the end of the week, this learning of being flexible is very applicable in the business that you handle, in the work that you're doing, even if you're employed or you're an entrepreneur running your own show. So let me explain how, which brings me to the second point of being adaptable. It's being aware, not being aware on a conscious level, but actually being aware on a subconscious level. And what I mean by that is you've got to be aware of the trends that are happening around in the environment. So you've got to take on board what are the trends, what is actually happening in the market within your industry. And remember, always look at it from the opposite side, which is look at it from the customer side. Look at what else is the customer looking at while they're looking at your brand and your business items, because the customer is not linear. They're not looking at something only once. And we as individuals are not linear. We are multiple processing at the same time. When we think of something, we might be thinking of X, but our brain is running A, B, C, D options parallelly. Similarly, awareness of what is happening within one's industry and within one's market, coupled with what else is going around to your target market, to your audience, to the customers you want, to the prospects you want. This is very, very critical to get and make sure your business continuity occurs. And this works two ways, internally within the business and externally with the clients and the business partners and the vendors. So let's look at how does it work internally first. We'll take it. The internal, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes on this area because it's really important. The internal of a business is extremely, extremely, extremely critical. I cannot re-emphasize how important it is for a business, its brand, for looking after its internal. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're going to run a marathon and you haven't run, you haven't jogged, you haven't sprinted in the last, say, 4 to 5 months. But all of a sudden, you've decided you're going to enter a marathon. Now, you have two choices. You've entered the marathon, you've paid the admission fee. You can wait out the time between now and when the marathon happens and simply land up on the day of the marathon, get into line, and you might have the best equipment and the running shoe and everything, and the gun fires, and you run. Can you imagine what's going to happen to you? How far do you think you're going to be able to run that marathon. And why aren't you going to be able to run that marathon? Simply because you haven't practiced. You haven't developed stamina. So exactly in the same way, in order to run a marathon, we've got to take care of certain aspects of our physical health that builds up the strength, that builds up endurance, that builds up stamina, and allows us to arrive on the day of the marathon and run it to win it in some extent, right? Each one of us running a marathon would have a different parameter, but you'll do much better than if you've not done anything and you just lined up. In the same way, the first thing that needs to be taken care of is to look at within the business, the people, the employees and the team that are involved in running the business with you, your colleagues and co-workers. How flexible are they? How aware of the trends and the market and the industry are there? That's the starting point. You start as a leader, as a business owner, as a professional leading a team. You start by looking at what is it you can do now that you've learned how to focus, how to be flexible, how to be aware. How do you transfer that individual learning to your team, to your co-worker, internally within the company, within the people? Why? Because this will again take a little bit of time, but holding people through, explaining how the flexibility occurs, just the same way that you're learning and you're picking up the tips right now. You can even replay this video for them if you want. Make them aware what happens when you focus from the big picture issue or the problem all the way down to a micro bite-sized problem. Suddenly, the huge mountain disappears and becomes a little anthill. Or is it a molehill? I think it's a molehill. So when it becomes small, you'll find team members contributing from their perspective very different solutions to that little bite-sized problem. And all of a sudden, people get enthused because solutions are coming forward. And when solutions come forward, people feel good. And people start looking at flexibility in taking on board how to chunk down big issues, make it into bite size, approach workarounds, and create a solution. Flexibility enables you as a company, as a team, to adapt. In the same manner, as we go forward, you take the next step and get another group of people or the same group of people to become aware of what's happening in the market. Ideally, the recommendation would be work together as one, which means you and your team, you share how to be flexible, take a day, learn with them, show them how to do it, bring the problems down into micro-sized, bite-sized issues, recommend a couple of solutions, ask for ideas and suggestions, and walk them through it. Then move into the second point, which is making or being aware of what is happening around us. And by us, I mean what's happening around the business, what's happening with the business in the market, with the dealers, with the channels, with the industry, what's happening with regulatory, what are the issues at hand, are there big problems? Throw them all up as a team on a whiteboard, chunk it down again, the same process applies. Ask for solutions and suggestions and way forwards and workarounds, and see which are recommended. Draw up a short list, and you'd be surprised how many brilliant ideas will come up, how many workable solutions would be provided, how many workarounds you'll have, and all of a sudden you'll see, hey, we can continue business this way. This looks to be a viable means, and then you try it and you take it forward. So, recapping back, what happens when you want to adapt? You're faced with change. You look at how to adapt first. Get to the how-to steps. And in today's episode, in this live, I'm recapping 2 points that will help you. Number 1, flexibility. Repeat how I've explained to get the flexibility, which is to be curious, break it into small bits, into bite-sized issues. Look at what solutions and workarounds can be provided by talking to your team and your people. Individually, you can ask family members, friends, anybody that this is an issue, this is the small thing, how do you think this can work? When you're curious and you ask questions, a lot more perspectives come on board. Secondly, be aware. Open yourself up to what is happening around in the industry. Go out of the little group that you have in your marketplace, within your work area, within your industry. Look at it from the person receiving your business product, receiving your brand. How are they viewing it? What's bothering them? How can you, as a brand and a business, give them something that just might help them solve or create a workaround for the issues they have? In turn, that's going to make them become aware, hey, this brand is helping me. This business is good. This person gave me this suggestion. So flexibility and being aware, taken together, those are the first 2 points of adapting to change. I hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to seeing you on my live tomorrow night, 7 p.m. IST, where I'll carry forward another 2 points. Have a brilliant evening.